Today we're going to look at the process for installing TeslaOffer's Power Frunk kit for my 2014 Tesla Model S P85. Make sure the kit you get matches your specific style of car. In my case, it is the pre-facelift version. With the pre-facelift kit, you'll want to make sure your hood is the double hook version, as can be seen here. The first thing we'll have to do to start the install is remove our plastic trim on the frunk, both left and right side, the wiper cowl, and the latch cowl. The left and right trim simply pop out as they latch into the wiper and latch cowl. Just press the rubber grommet in to remove them. The grommet itself does not need to be removed. The wiper cowl also just pops in and comes out very easily. Once it's popped off, just finagle it out as it is a rather awkward piece. The latch cowl has two push pins that need to be removed before fully removing the cowl. Simply use a flathead screwdriver to pop the pin up, using the indent that is in the push pin as your guide. Then pull the pins out, being careful not to lose them inside of your nose cone, like I almost did. After the push pins have been removed, it's time to remove the hatch cowl. We want to be extra careful as the center of the cowl is prone to breaking if pressure is applied. The cowl is held on by flared plastic retaining pins that will come out with upward pressure. Start at one end and pry up, then work your hands underneath the cowl and apply upward pressure, or use an pry bar. Depending on how much Tesla has worked on your car, you may or may not have all of the retaining pins. Looks like I'm missing about half of mine. Next up is removing the struts that hold the hood up. Be careful when doing this, as the hood will drop some and hit you in the head. To remove the struts, use a flathead screwdriver to fit into the slot between the metal retaining sleeve and the strut ball. Push the screwdriver in, and then lift up slightly until the retaining sleeve is up and out of the way. Once it's moved, you can simply pull the strut off the ball. You'll want to go ahead and remove one side completely at first, but only attach the bottom of the new strut. The bottom is the end that has the cables hanging out. We do this because it's a bit difficult to attach the new struts if you're not able to easily move the hood. Once one side is removed, go ahead and move to the other side. You'll need to support the hood with something. In my case, I just use my head, as the hood is pretty light. If you're not comfortable doing this, simply ask a friend to hold the hood, or use something like a broomstick to support it. Go ahead and attach both struts now, and the hood should support itself. You can test the struts by manually moving the hood to make sure it does not bind up anywhere and moves smoothly. Now it's time to start the wiring. First thing we'll do is attach the negative lead to the battery. The easiest way to do this is by removing the air filter. We'll first need to remove two push pins and then lift up the cover over the airbox. It will not completely come off due to the wiper blades. Next is remove the two 10mm bolts that hold the filter to the car. I highly recommend using at least one extension with a ratchet to get in there, and ideally using a socket that is magnetic so you don't drop the bolts. Be extremely careful not to drop these bolts. It's an absolute pain to retrieve them. Ask me how I might know that. Once the bolts are safely removed, you'll need to undo the two latches at the top of the filter box. You can pry these up with your finger or a flat head screwdriver like I did. Once both latches are undone, you can go ahead and remove the filter and we'll have access to the battery. The harness we need to attach to the battery is the one with the purple connector at one end, a female spade terminal attachment, and a C-ring attachment. The C-ring is our negative wire. Go ahead and loosen this 10mm terminal on the negative side of the battery. You don't have to remove it all the way, just enough to be able to slide the C-ring attachment behind the nut. This was extremely hard to do one-handed since I had to hold the camera. Slide the wire underneath the front support bar toward the battery and attach it to the terminal. Make sure to attach it from the top and not the bottom like I did. I changed it off camera because I needed two hands to actually do this. Use one hand to hold the negative wire in place while you tighten the nut on the terminal back up. Next we have the positive wire that we have to attach. The newer kits now come with an add a fuse attachment. We'll remove the left side's fuse box cover and remove this 30 amp fuse. I always use a pair of pliers to remove fuses, but there are actual tools to do this too. Once you have the fuse removed, go ahead and put in the extra slot on the add a fuse. This can be pretty tight, so make sure it's pressed all the way in. Once it's in, go ahead and install the add a fuse where the 30 amp fuse was, and make sure to run the wire toward the back of the car. Before we continue, let's go ahead and test the main board to make sure we have the wires ran correctly. Remove the white attachment on the positive cable and slide the female spade terminal from the negative wire loom into it. Make sure the slotted side of the spade terminal goes toward the bottom of the white connector so it properly clips in. Plug the white connector back into the positive cable and then connect the purple connector to the back of the control module. If we've connected everything correctly, we will have a blinking red light. Now it's time to have some fun and donate some of our blood to our Teslas. We now need to remove the front latch from the car. This is held in by two 10mm bolts that are rather difficult to get to. I recommend using either a 10mm ratchet wrench or a shallow 10mm socket to get into there. Once you've managed to remove these two annoying bolts, you can start to remove the latch. If you pull out slightly on the front emblem bar and push the frunk seal back, you can more easily slide the latch up and out. There are two cables that we need to disconnect before it will fully come out. To remove the black connector, press in the lever on the car side of the connector and simply pull apart. For the white connector, there's a small lever that you have to pull up on and then can disconnect it. Once these are disconnected, remove the latch assembly from the car. Now we need to replace the much stronger spring that's in the latch assembly with the weaker one from TeslaOffer's kit. Before you begin to do so, make sure you take extreme caution when working with spring assemblies like this. Springs have a ton of force and built-up tension that can cause some serious damage and harm if you slip or mess up. With that said, make sure you get a small screwdriver that can slide into the notch next to the spring leg. Using the screwdriver, gently lever out the spring leg and bring it up and over the latch frame. As can be seen with mine, once it did finally get over the metal frame, the spring launched off about 4 feet from where I was sitting. After you have the spring removed, you can put in the new spring. Since this one does not have nearly as much tension in it, it is much easier to place in. Make sure the latch is fully closed and set one leg of the spring over the metal bar that moves for the latch. And then slide the other leg over and into the slot that you removed the other one from. You should be able to place this spring leg by hand, but you can also use leverage from a screwdriver if needed. Next, we need to attach the latch actuator to the latch assembly. Go ahead and plug the latch assembly back in before placing it back into the car. We're just going to pretend that I didn't have to re-record this whole section because I forgot to plug it in before I got everything screwed in. Future Joe here. Make sure to tighten the lock nuts on the latch actuator before installing it. It's a nightmare to adjust and tighten this after the fact. They are 12mm nuts, and I'd recommend adjusting it to be almost all the way in, as you can see in this cut. Trust me, this will save you a lot of headache later. Once it's plugged in and down in the nose cone, go ahead and slide the latch actuator over the latch assembly, making sure the holes lined up. Once you have everything lined up, grab your screws and very carefully slide them into both the actuator and assembly and screw them in. It's very easy to drop these screws, so take your time here. There's actually no need to tighten the latch all the way down at this stage, as we will almost certainly need to adjust it later. Time to run the wires from the actuator behind the headlight. Fortunately, this isn't too terribly difficult, but you do want to be careful and make sure you run it in the correct location. The gray plug should come out about halfway up the front support bar and be accessible when coming from the other side. There is a larger and more convenient hole about an inch back from the hole you want to run it in. If you use that hole, you will not be able to slide the actuator in behind the headlight all the way. If your arm is small enough, you can actually reach almost all the way in behind the headlight and easily grab the gray connectors without much of an issue, and then just feed the wire through. I tried my best to get my camera down to show exactly where you want this cable ran. It's a bit of a tight spot and the GoPro just barely fits in there. Hopefully this will show you exactly where you want to run the cable. Once you have all of the cable ran, go ahead and push the actuator all the way in behind the headlight. Carefully loop the pull cable into the nose cone, making sure not to put any hard or sharp bends into it. Once you have everything in place, make sure where you're going to put the actuator is free of dust, and then remove the adhesive backing label and attach the actuator behind the headlight. The next part is the only part that has any sort of modification to the car and is easily removable. Inside of the frunk, remove the 2 push pins that hold the release button and light in place. Mine were already loose because Tesla never pushed them all the way back in when they worked on my car, but if they weren't, you'd want to use a nylon pry bar to pull them out. Once they're out and you have the plastic panel removed, go ahead and unclip the 2 connectors and move the plastic panel out of the way. Lift up your frunk seal and move the carpet back. There's a small dip in the metal directly next to the latch that you can slide the end of the wire loom into. Once they're in, put the carpet and seal back in place. Unclip the OffWhite connector that is attached to this latch, and then cut the wire loom sleeve back about 1 inch. From here, you will need to attach the white and gray wire and the blue wire to the factory loom. The colors change depending on the year of your car. For me, white went to orange with yellow stripe, and then blue went to gray with white stripe. I know on a 2012 it was white to orange with yellow stripe, and blue to solid orange. Regardless of year or colors, it should be white wire to the top wire of the connector and blue wire to the bottom wire of the connector. Once you have the posi tap over the wire, use a pair of pliers to crimp the connection all the way down and make sure it fully locks in. Once you have both wires tapped, go ahead and plug the connector back into the latch and then stuff the excess wiring into the latch area. Now we need to run the main wire loom behind the headlight. Remember that larger hole I mentioned back at the actuator stage? We actually want to use that hole as it's much easier to work with. You can actually fully access this hole and you can see my fingers pop through the area right next to the headlight. Small side note, save yourself the extra step and make sure the white connector stays down near the latch. That one does not need to go all the way through to the other side. You'll see me run it back through in a moment because I didn't realize this. Once you have the wires run properly through the backside of the headlight, route them back towards the center of the frunk, as well as the wires for both hood struts, running them towards the center as well. For some reason my GoPro decided we didn't need any audio, but that's fine. It's time to connect the actual control module finally. Go ahead and connect everything into the color and shape coordinated connectors, dark blue to dark blue, both grays to their respective spot, and both sets of connectors for the struts. It doesn't matter if you connect left and right up properly, as long as these sets of connectors plug into the same spot. Turn the module around to connect the power cable, and then finish it up by connecting the buzzer to the red connector. Now that we have everything connected, it's time to find a spot to mount the control module. This will vary a little bit if you have the air suspension upgrade, but there should be a spot in between the canister and the fuse box that you can mount it to, or you can slide it underneath the support bar next to the brake fluid. Since I don't have air suspension, I opted to install mine onto the back of the actual frunk plastic. Make sure to clean the area where you're going to put it first to remove any dust. Attach the adhesive to the back of the control module, then remove the backing for the adhesive and stick it to the plastic. Once it's pressed firmly onto the plastic, go ahead and attach the buzzer to the top of the control module. Once everything is fully installed, it's time to do a little bit of cable management to make sure nothing is in the way. I took the majority of the main loom and tucked it behind the headlight inside of the tire well, and then took the strut loom and tucked that next to the fuse box. For the positive and negative cables and the buzzer wires, I tucked all of this down in front of the fuse box and battery location. Do take note that the fuse box lid only goes on one way. It has a larger clip and a smaller clip. If your lid does not go on, simply turn it around and it should snap in even with the added fuse wire coming out of the side. With everything hooked up and ready to go, it's time to add the button to the white connector at the front of the nose cone. With it connected, hold the button. It will beep once to tell you that it's initialized, beep twice for activation, and then it will beep anywhere from 3 to 5 times, which indicates the speed of the system. I have mine set to 4. Go ahead and disconnect the button and set the wire inside of the nose cone. You are now ready to test the system. You can do this with your key fob, pulling down on the hood, or pressing the button inside of the frunk. It's at this point where you get to see if you need to adjust your latch or cable. The latch can move left and right about an inch and up and down about 1/4 of an inch. We can see that mine didn't fully latch all the way, and I ended up having to adjust my latch almost all the way to the right to get it to fully latch. Once you're happy with how the frunk opens and closes, it's time to reinstall everything and get your car back to normal. Installation is essentially just the reversal of removal, so there's not too much to touch on here. The main key points are with the airbox, front latch cowl, and the side cowls. With the airbox, once again, be extremely careful not to drop the screws that go into it. It took me almost 45 minutes to fish the screw out using a magnetic endoscope to find and grab it after my right one fell. When it comes to the front latch cowl, if you have all of your push pins, congratulations! Ignore this part. If you don't, make sure you have at least one push pin on the far corners of the cowl, and ideally at least one near the center. When putting the cowl back in, don't just mash it down. Carefully take note of the location of your push pins and push them into place with a nylon pry bar or flathead screwdriver so they line up with the holes, then push them in. For the 2 large side pieces, the main thing is the rubber grommet. I used a flathead screwdriver to work the grommet up and around the plastic. This grommet is the main thing that really holds these side pieces in, so take your time and work the rubber out and over the plastic. And that's it, we're done. Congratulations and enjoy your Power Frunk kit. If you have any questions, make sure to drop them in the comments below. And as always, if you like the content I'm putting out, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, and don't forget to hit the notification bell to stay up to date with new content as it comes out. Thanks for watching, take care.